All right, guys, how's it going? East Bay Anglers out here today. We're talking all about one thing, and that's Livescope. And I want to talk to you guys about why Livescope is such a big thing and why everybody's talking about it. First of all, when Livescope first hit the scene, there were a lot of anglers that you could consider average anglers that immediately became above average anglers and started to catch fish of their, some of the best fish, the biggest bags of their life right after getting Livescope. It didn't take very long after Livescope hit the scene before we saw massive things happening. We saw people catching bigger bags than had ever been caught on film, right? We saw people catching bigger bags in general than they'd ever caught prior. So anglers that put a lifetime in on the water, after a year or two with Livescope and forward-facing sonar, they had caught bigger and more impressive fish than in their entire life. Now, it goes on and on. You can look at a tournament scene in North America. You can look at that area, the Canadian and the northern part of the United States, and what you're going to get, Northeast, is you're going to get average bags in the tournaments once Livescope hit the scene and everybody had it on their boat. The average bag, we're talking smallmouth now, not largemouth. The average bag for smallmouth went up 5 pounds. Now, that's a fundamental fact. 5 pounds, every angler. So every angler that came in and essentially was able to do this and able to do that for the past 10, 15, 20 years was only able to catch an average of 5 pounds more consistently. So if you go across the board, every angler averaged 5 pounds more. That's impressive. That's very impressive. It shows you what the power of Livescope and forward-facing sonar has. It has the power to locate the fish. Okay, it has the power to show you how the fish react to what you're doing. It has the ability for you to work your bait in different water columns. You can do it right over their head. You can do it right over their, to their side. You can do different angles to get these fish to react. A lot of times the bait and the presentation change the angle. Boom, you get bit. And these guys are sitting there saying, well, I'm really skilled. I've got a lot of skill. It's like, no, bro, what did you catch before you got Livescope and forward-facing sonar? Tell me some stories about your impressive catches prior to that. Let me know how many double digits you got. Let me know your biggest fish. Let me know what you did to get them. But that stuff is impressive, right? But when you add Livescope and forward-facing sonar, and let's say my local lake is stacked with 5-pounders or 6-pounders, whatever it may be, and I go out there and I just sit on them the entire day. I've got my bait in the strike zone presented it right there in front of those fish. The fish cannot, if the fish want to move, I'll move with the fish, okay? That's how big it is. It's like you're able to literally have your bait in the strike zone in the high percentage areas all the time. So that's why you're able to catch more fish. You're able to get bit because there's fish there and you're able to present it in every way that you can imagine to get those fish to react. Now, in a lot of situations when the fish are schooled up like that, they're very competitive. They're actively competitive against each other for the food that is in the water. So they're going to compete, and you're going to have certain situations where it's like, wow. But you got to remember, these same guys that are out there doing this would not be able to do this without Livescope, without forward-facing sonar. They would not be able to do this. They would not have the ability to do this. So it's really interesting how a lot of people say, Livescope's cheating. Livescope is not cheating. Livescope is just part of technology. And I got to tell you guys, you really got to understand that technology has changed, but the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So what I'm trying to say is when we had all these different developments hit the world of fishing and these different developments, none of them made anywhere near the difference. So everything that's come out, trolling motors and, different map charts that were out and available, you could look at the layouts of lakes and all that stuff and all these things of the old, all these things of the past that people really don't care anymore. They go out, they get their boat, they put it at about 15, 20 miles an hour and they just cruise and they just mark schools of fish and there's a waypoint, mark, I mean, it's kind of like there's no skill involved. There's absolutely very little respect that any other angler can have for these anglers. Like, so when they go out and they catch something and it's impressive and they're all like so excited, I look at them and I'm kind of just like, wow, like, look at Barry Bonds. He took steroids, right? We know he was huge into steroids, and he's got an asterisk next to his name, letting everyone know that he needed steroids to become the Barry Bonds that we know. The Barry Bonds without steroids. How many home runs would Barry Bonds have, right? But do the home runs really matter because he was using steroids? Do they really matter? Does anybody care? No, they don't. Now, Jason Giambi, I believe, on the Oakland A's at the time, his brother was also, both those guys were steroids. What happened to them? Same thing. So if the world of fishing and we look at bass fishing and we actually respect it and we consider it a sport, then every other sport has banned, certain things that give certain players advantages over other players. So for me, just look at the tournament scene. Everybody's jumping on board. They might not like it, but they have to have it to compete. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair that a bunch of guys that didn't put in the time, that don't live, breathe, eat, sleep fishing, are going to go out there with this technology and pretend like they know what's going on when there's other guys out there that know, okay, this is when, the first freeze right here on the dew in right around the end of December, early January. That marks the wintertime pattern. I know to go out there and I know what type of fishing I'm going to do. I'm going to do that certain type of fishing, slow. You're going to be fishing swim baits. You're going to be fishing plastics. You're going to be fishing blade baits and spoons. You're going to be fishing hair jigs and grubs. You might fish a tube, but it's very simple in the winter time. In the sense that, certain presentations are going to be really good and certain presentations are going to be a waste of your time. Fishing slower is better, right? But does the Livescope tell you that? No, it does not. And so I know when the butterflies first appear in my area, in my region, I know exactly where the fish are. I know that the males should be pulling up, and the females should be pulling up. The males should already have the beds fanned and ready to go. And that's when the first butterflies come in. And that's going to be the first stage, the first group that pulls up and goes in there and tries to lay some eggs. Now, I know that, certain creeks that are annual. I know which creeks feed underground. So even if they're dry, you can say, okay, well, this time of year, even though this is a dry creek, it has an underneath that, it actually is running water through. And these little things, knowing, okay, we've got this particular overcast today, and because of the overcast, I know exactly where the fish should be. I know because it's a sunny day and it's whatever time of the year where the fish are going to be. I know particularly in the wintertime when I see squirrels and I see birds and they're basking and they're warming up in that sun, I know the fish have pulled up on the rocks, on points and other areas, and I know that they're sitting there doing the same thing. They're soaking up that sun. They're sitting next to those rocks, which are warming up, and they're trying to warm up. They're going to pull back, but they're pulling up. And there's certain situations where you have to know. You have to know what's going on. You have to understand, okay, these crawfish live on this area of the lake, and they burrow underneath the sand. So if you look, it looks lifeless, and there's nothing there. But burrowed underneath the sand are crawfish. Burrowed over here are frogs. So little things that take a lot of time to learn, time on the water, to really learn, and years dedicating your life to understanding this stuff. And then you've got the guys out there with Livescope, and they spend all the money, right? They have no idea what the hell's going on. They're looking at all this stuff. This stuff is telling them things, and then they're telling you what it's telling them. Then they make it sound like it's complicated. I'm going to make it sound really simple for you. The cell phones and all the technology that they make today is essentially made for toddlers. I mean, your children can use your cell phone. They can operate your TV. They can play with your PlayStations. They can do all this stuff, right? So if a child can do these things and a child can operate these, for these guys that are grown men to sit there and pretend like it's that hard, to act like there's that big of a learning curve on this electronics is wild. And then the fact that they have everybody else helping everybody else, right? There's all this information out there. so they can get a head start. I mean, it's just wild. So you guys got to understand there's a lot of hate coming because nobody respects anything that anybody's doing with Livescope and forward-facing sonar. So there's a lack of respect, a huge lack of respect. And then there's this professional scene that's all jumped on it. So the professionals aren't even getting the respect they deserve because they're really not fishing the traditional way that I think a lot of people, they grew up, they fell in love with fishing, the sport of fishing, and, you know, the old guy on the lake, there'd always be that old guy, and there'd always be that gentleman that had put years in. And you knew that no matter what time of year it was, no matter what day of the year it was, he would know where the fish were and how to catch them. And, you know, let's say he might, you know, have multiple options. Multiple options for you at any moment, any day, any situation, any time of year. Now, that's a fisherman, right? That's a fisherman. That's somebody whose brain I'd like to pick. These guys that use Livescope, I don't really care. Like, oh, what I did was I drove around for 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, I understand. You found a school of fish and you dropped, oh, wow, big deal. So just keep that in mind, guys. When you see a lot of this back and forth, a lot of people want to see fishermen go out and fish. They want to see them use their intuition and all their experience and the knowledge that they've gained with the time on the water. No one wants to see somebody go out and essentially use their electronics, look down at their electronics 99% of the time. And it's hopefully we get it changed, guys. Hopefully it changes very soon and the professional scene doesn't allow it anymore. I think it's great for the average guy who wants to go out and, you know, catch some fish, and it makes you feel great when you're able to go out and do that. But I mean, you might as well just go out with some live bait, live shiners, right? I mean, no, right? There's no, I mean, I don't personally have any, like, nobody really respects when you fish live bait. You catch impressive catches, but nobody respects it. It's the same thing with Livescope. It's the same thing with nets. I mean, we could throw dynamite in the water, we could throw nets in the water, and we could call it fishing. I mean, these were some of the first, you know, variations of fishing was net fishing and spoon fishing. We're talking 4,000 years ago. So 4,000 years ago, they were using nets and they were using spoons. You might say, well, what were they using? And they were using seashells. And, you know, one of these days I'll do a video on historical fishing, but, you know, I can break down to you how the method that you think is so revolutionary has been around for 5,000 or 6,000 years that we know about. And you think it's revolutionary. Interesting. Very interesting. So, guys, whatever you think, you know, it's up in the air. I mean, the world is a crazy place, but right now we got to take bass fishing back. We got to get these guys who basically weren't even on the scene, who were nowhere to be found. Nobody was talking about them, but then they get Livescope and now, oh, they're able to catch these fish. I mean, nothing changed. They lived on these lakes. They fished these lakes their whole lives. Now all of a sudden they've got Livescope and oh my God, they figured it out. Yeah, they figured it out. Sure did. Guys, stay tuned. We got a whole bunch of videos coming out. We're going to talk about some things controversial. Maybe you're with me. Maybe you're not with me. Maybe you're in the middle. So you're left, right, in the middle. It doesn't really matter. You know, we are in a democracy. We're in the United States. The whole point is that everybody goes out there and that they compete and that it's fair, right? And that I want to see these anglers, and a lot of people want to see these anglers go out and fish and be a fisherman. And part of being a fisherman, you know, I've listened to these guys speak and they're like, yeah, you know, I mean, when spring comes, I'm ready to go. And I'm thinking, that's not a fisherman. A fisherman fishes all year round. A fisherman fishes through all the weather conditions. They don't come when the fish are pulling up and they're spawning and they're easy to get to and they're highly susceptible and they're vulnerable. That's when you want to go fish for them because you're a professional? Okay. Makes total sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost like taking as much of the challenge away from it as possible. So, yeah, let me know how you guys feel. Make some comments, like, dislike, subscribe, whatnot. Stay tuned, guys.